Good morning and greetings from Alberta. With the carbon tax looming on the horizon here, about a week away, making all of our lives more expensive and difficult, I just wanted to look at something I've seen people say quite often. Firstly, does Canada even need to have a carbon tax? And secondly, do we have more trees than we need to absorb CO2? And I think it's a fair question. I've previously done the math and I know it's true, or at least close, but I've never explained it before. So if you don't mind bearing with me for a few minutes, there is a bit of boring math, but I think we could maybe come to a conclusion at the end, or at least you could make your own mind up if Canada should even have a carbon tax. So on a good note, it's early in the morning, there is some math, but I did it for you. So bear with me here. So most estimates, the consensus seems to be that Canada has about 318 billion trees. We may have a little more, we may have a little less, but that just seems to be the number that I could easily find. 318 billion. Now, the average tree can absorb in a year anywhere from 10 to 40 kilograms of CO2. And just to go back to like grade school science class for a sec, photosynthesis. This is where plants and vegetation and trees absorb sunlight and CO2 and create sugars, mixing with minerals and waters to create sugars and the various things that vegetation need to grow. And the byproduct is they release oxygen. So every time you take a breath, thank a tree. So it's impossible to say what each individual tree is absorbing or not. There's a host of factors from drought and fire and carbon sinks and the maturity of the tree. Is the tree growing or dying? Dying trees will fall down and decompose in the earth and then eventually release CO2. So it's impossible to say what each individual tree is absorbing. So for argument's sake, we'll just take the middle of the road, and I've seen other reports do this as well, and we'll just say 25 kilograms a year. So for this argument's sake here, each tree absorbs 25 kilograms of CO2 a year. Now, Canada's emissions over the last 25 years have hovered around 700 megatons a year. And here is the government chart there. Now, you can see we have some slight fluctuations, 730 megatons, 706, and you see slight variations. But we've been right around 700 megatons or just hovering above it for 25 years. And just to give you something in comparison, China is at around 12,000 megatons a year. So they emit, in a month or less than about 3 weeks what we emit in an entire year. So when you see slight variations, it's a drop in the bucket. And then at the end, you see that there was a significant drop, and that was COVID, people not working, people not driving, on and on, right? So the average over the 20 years was 714 megatons. Now, a megaton is equal to 1 billion kilograms. So the average of 714 megatons times a billion kilograms is 714 billion kilograms of CO2 emitted in Canada on average. So, just to get the first one out of the way here, let's use all of Canada's trees. 318 billion times 25 kilograms of absorption equals 7.9 trillion, with a T, kilograms of absorption of CO2. And that's if all the trees are firing, which we know they're not. So for argument's sake, the best estimate I could, please don't hang me out to dry here. I am no tree doctor. But if we were to remove 50% of all the trees in Canada for those factors I mentioned before, drought, insect infestation, maturity, dying, cold weather, I believe that to be a more than fair estimate. I'll let you be the judge of that. But if we were to remove 50% of Canada's trees, that would be 159 billion trees. If you multiply that by our 25 kilogram of absorption per year, that gives us 3.975 trillion kilograms of CO2 absorbed. And that is over 5 times the amount of what Canada emits. So if we were to remove 50% of the trees, we are absorbing over 5 times the amount of what Canada emits. And now if people were to say, well, you forgot this, you forgot that. Okay, let's reduce that number again by half. Let's use 25% of Canada's trees, which half of 159 would have been 79.5 billion trees. That's 25%. We're removing 75% of Canada's trees. We're basically saying 75% of Canada's trees are not doing anything. They're not absorbing anything. They're just standing there. 79.5 billion trees, 25% of 318, can absorb 1.9 trillion kilograms of CO2. So 25% of Canada's trees are still absorbing over 2.5 times the amount of what our entire country emits in a year. In my opinion, I think that's an outlandish estimate to remove 75% of Canada's trees and just say they're not doing anything. Obviously, the number must be higher in my mind. Again, no tree doctor over here, but you make your own mind up here. So if we were to now break it down to like trees per capita, we take our 318 billion, we divide it by 40 million Canadians. That's an average of 7,950 trees per Canadian. Now, 7,950 multiplied by 25 kilograms of absorption is 198,000 kilograms. So just the trees per Canadian can absorb almost 200,000 kilograms of CO2. Now, if you look it up, the average Canadian, they say, emits about 14 tons of CO2. There's 907 kilograms in a US ton. So 14 tons per Canadian times 907 is 12,698 kilograms. So, by estimates, Canadians are emitting about 12,500 kilograms of CO2, whether it's your home, your vehicle, going to work, buying food, all the factors estimated in, they're saying about 12,500. Just the trees per person absorb 200,000 kilograms of CO2. In my opinion, by not being a scientist, but able to do basic math, we have way more trees in Canada than we need to scrub our CO2 emissions. And I don't believe that Canadians should be paying anything for carbon taxes. In fact, if 50% of our trees are absorbing over 5 times what we emit in a year. That means our trees are absorbing CO2 in the atmosphere from other places. Canada, I believe, is third on the list for most forested area. I think it's Russia, Brazil, and Canada. We are a giant filter. We scrub the atmosphere. We absorb far more CO2 than we emit. And apparently, the government's supposed to be planting billions of more trees. I mean, I think the way to, like, the climate has always changed. It has for billions of years. We've had hot ages, ice ages. I think it was about 11 to 12,000 years ago, the earth warmed up, which allowed humans to flourish and migrate. And if the earth hadn't have warmed up, we probably wouldn't be here talking right now. So in no way am I denying climate change. The climate has always changed. I think we need to discuss how to actually deal with it. You know, charging people money to a corrupt government who is going to waste it and lose it is not going to change the atmosphere of the planet. I don't think we're going to change the atmosphere. We have to adapt to it and deal with it via technology and planting a lot more trees. I mean, these are the numbers that are available to the public. You can do the math yourself. I think I overestimated. We could remove 75% of Canada's trees and still be over 2.5 times the amount of emissions that we emit. So I think we're getting suckered here. But please comment down below, questions, comments. I always like them. Do we need a carbon tax or just plant some more trees and get a new government? I'll let you decide. Have a great day. Take care.